Here we go again, folks. It's that time of the year, trade season. The sole chance we have, collectively as NBA fans, to set aside any sense of rationality, let our hearts fill up with hope, and explore. Explore every possibility, fantasize about the most entertaining, just a little week of bliss, fully entrenched in this fantasy world, till it abruptly comes crashing down on our heads, and gone with it, our hopes and dreams. That's right, you know your boy can dramatize the shit out of just about any situation. So the Clippers broke the ice, delving balls deep, straight into rebuild mode. They didn't go 1 foot in, 1 foot out, swapping out DeAndre while leaving the real chip standing, and I gotta give credit where it's due. There's nothing that bothers me more than a team refusing to accept its fate. You want to rebuild to go smooth, you gotta sell high. Now wait around for a potentially career-altering injury to Blake. Not trap your stars, your fans, your organization in mediocrity till you're left with no option other than to almost literally start from scratch, trading a player on his expiring deal, not only wasting your own time and value, but wasting the prime years of said star. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what the New Orleans Pelicans need to accomplish here. DeMarcus Cousins went down, leaving the rest of his career in a state of limbo, and right along with it, the future of the franchise itself. They were never able to build a proper team around the generational talent. Their one real success has been acquiring that superstar to pair him with, but unfortunately, and not due to their own accord, they failed to achieve that season-long experiment. They were able to secure a pretty great bounce-back deal, acquiring Nikola Mirotic to replace Cousins in the front line, all the while adding a needed presence behind the arc, all the while ridding themselves of an Omer Sheik contract they were beginning to regret heavily, but they did have to give up a first-round pick in the process. But with Cousins off the books this summer and AD the one after next, the future is looking iffy at best. Now, the beauty of this particular rumor is that it's not constricted to this February 8th deadline. It will absolutely not come into fruition in that time span, but unlike the other potential deals, that won't come with any disappointment. The prospect of an Anthony Davis trade is something that's existed for a long time prior to this year's deadline and will exist for a long time into the foreseeable future. At this rate, this cloud of a potential deal will be hanging over the Brow's brow throughout the full extent of his New Orleans career. Matter of fact, the report was that 4 teams are preparing to chase Davis this summer, not at the deadline, and of those 4, the Boston Celtics of course have been rumored as a top suitor for quite a while prior to this, and are now even reported to be building a trade package for Kawhi as well. So assuming Kawhi Leonard really could be on the outs, as again this is our time to relieve ourselves of those doubts and inhibitions, considering the insane level either of these dudes would elevate that franchise to, let's have some fun with it. Which one of these 2 transcendent stars would be the ideal piece to close out this Boston squad? One or the other, this will create the second dynasty of today's NBA, and almost certainly the greatest dynastic rivalry in the history of this sport. You combine those Celtics and these Warriors with, say, a LeBron-led Houston group next season, or even one that features Paul George, and the playoff ferocity over these next 5+ postseasons is endless. Alright, so that being said, to compare and contrast fits, I've broken this thing into 6 main categories with a suitable rating for each, all of which I'll explain as we go along. So let's go. Who is the final piece to a Boston Celtics dynasty, Kawhi Leonard or Anthony Davis? Before we get started, leave your predictions in the comments below. Yeah, real quick, I'll wait. Come on, man, you're holding up the video for the rest of us. Alright, you done? Cool, let's get it. Category number 1, the ability to mask the losses. Essentially, of the talent, strengths, dynamics lost in return, what is replaced and what isn't replaced. Now, this is a little hard to judge because we don't know with any certainty what the trade package will exactly consist of, but we can make a pretty accurate guess. For one thing, we know there's no way there's a package accepted that doesn't include one of Boston's budding stars, and thus we have more complication induced, as the prospect of losing either Jaylen or Tatum is practically unfathomable. Both have shown so much promise at only 21 and 19 years old respectively, show real potential to be elite on both ends, both efficient, both high IQ players, both fit the Celtics system perfectly and move right along parallel with the direction of this modern era of the NBA. But this is where Jayson Tatum sets himself apart. The man is just a slightly more valuable piece in regards to this league transition we're currently in the midst of. He can play the 4, he can defend the 4 well, while being extremely agile, being able to run the floor in a fast-paced offense. All these things Jaylen can do, but at the 3, not so much the 4. And most importantly, to top it off, the man is a much purer shooter, so he can space the floor. So combined with his age and length, if I had to choose, I'm probably keeping Tatum. That being said, it's not all up to me, or rather the Celtics, it's up to New Orleans and San Antonio really. They got the leverage to make their preference and have it honored. So I see it like this, and this is also, by the way, something I haven't even mentioned in terms of value to the Celtics. If you're sending out AD, you likely want to replace that position, and Tatum comes closer. If you're sending out Kawhi, Brown comes closer. And like I said, this is important to Boston too. You get AD and you still have Tatum and Horford. There is a little bit of incentive there to keep Jaylen and keep the group as dynamic as possible. It's pretty unlikely that either of these teams would accept Horford in return unless maybe they're dumping some major salary in return. So assuming it goes down like that, Kawhi for Brown, Davis for Tatum, and neglecting the picks in the trade package since they're mostly irrelevant here, considering there are a low chance at finding a young transcendent talent while Davis and Kawhi are already transcendent talents. And it looks like this. With regards to Davis versus Tatum, you do sacrifice some shooting, you do sacrifice a little quickness, speed, agility, which in turn creates weaker perimeter D. Onto Kawhi versus Jaylen. Again, you lose some foot speed, but other than that, Kawhi's yelling, anything you can do, I can do better. And any chick you can screw, I can get... Wait, nah, not that part. Just the first part. And again, this is just about what they're able to replace, not what they add. So Kawhi has a very slight edge here, combined with the fact of the matter that the fillers here will most likely be guys like Marcus Smart, Rozier, Morris, Ojale, and the only real area either of those two sort of stand out here is Kawhi defending the perimeter. But this section doesn't shake up the narrative much at all. The main thing we're looking at here is replacing Jaylen and Jayson. So we got Kawhi at a near perfect 8.8 out of 9 and the Browns at a solid 8. The reason I put this rating at 9 rather than the full 10 is I can't really say it's as important to replace traits as it is to bring new ones to the table. And that brings us to the next category, enhancement. Again, we're looking at traits that stand out in contrast to the given player's strengths. So if these traits line up with each other, they're disqualified because that's replacement, not supplement. By that principle, you put Jaylen's game against Leonard's and you see they overlap on many fronts. Perimeter defense, check. Slashing off the ball, check. Ball control, catch and shoot, finishing at the rim, transition game, check, 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 check. The list goes on, and to me, Jaylen Brown is a poor man's Kawhi Leonard. But that's exactly that, a poor man's version, a lesser version, an unfinished product in contrast. Yeah, like a poor man's version is a less desirable version, an unfinished product is unfinished. So although Kawhi exceeds Jaylen in just about every area where their skills overlap, Jaylen is 5 years younger. That's 5 extra years of production and growth. And so we see this coincides with a separate category I had initially planned as a standalone, which is longevity. So we'll lump these two categories together and give this whole thing a grand sum of 20 points. Now, while I know Jaylen's got a lot more in him that he hasn't shown, let's be real, he'll never quite reach Kawhi's level before the time he plateaus out. But almost just as important, and I know it's only his second year in the league, but look at Jaylen's career trajectory versus Kawhi's. You see how sharp those spikes are from year 1 to year 2? Scoring, rebounding, passing, efficiency. He's growing at a much faster pace. I know that people will make the case that Kawhi came up with much less opportunity and didn't enjoy those spikes in production until about his 4th or 5th year, but even still, those progressions happened at a lower rate too. And matter of fact, Jaylen actually had less playing time in these first 2 seasons than Kawhi did in his. Even if that wasn't the case, earlier growth gives him a head start no matter the circumstances. So it's that classic question of win now versus longevity. It's, do you put all your chips in at once and take on the Golden State Warriors? And to answer that, you need to ask yourself another question. Do you truly believe this team could compete head-to-head with Golden State the next 3, 4, 5 seasons? You don't trade an exceptional young talent like Jaylen or Jayson just to get inches away from a championship but still out of reach. You also need to consider the way that you're built. Kyrie is 25, Hayward 27. These guys will still be out there enjoying the final years of their prime when Jaylen hits his. It's not a question of having him as a successor. He can contribute to the current core and be a part of the next one. Now we look at AD versus Tatum. Different story altogether. Their skills don't line up really at all, apart from what I already mentioned in the last category. Davis is a much superior rebounder, defender, except on the perimeter, which obviously is not his game, though for a true big he possesses way above average skills there. He's a better scorer despite being a worse shooter, and he's way out ahead in terms of leadership qualities. Apart from having a vastly different game in comparison, the key difference here is age and upside. Davis is only 24, and we've yet to see the full extent of his game, improving literally all the way across the board season after season, and you best believe he's not done. This is the reason we say he's got the keys to be the leader of the post-LeBron era. People throw other names in there, Giannis, Ben Simmons, even Zion Williamson. It all depends on what kind of situation they end up landing themselves in. But in terms of pure talent, tools, and ability, Anthony Davis has to be the front runner there. So for Kawhi, I'm going to give him a hard 18.5 because they're such similar players and because I don't expect his game to improve all that much from this point on. AD is a clear 20 out of 20, especially when you think about what I somehow managed to miss all the way up to this point, which are the exact areas that AD improves: rebounding, physicality, while still being a capable shooter and extremely mobile. The rare combo big, desirable in this modern era and in Boston's fast pace. And thus we turn our attention to system fit. Now this is a relatively simple one to ascertain. The idea is harmony with the individual pieces as well as synergy as a unit. Now I think on his own, Kawhi is probably the better fit, but when you consider the amount of talent on the wings here already with a healthy Gordon Hayward, you have to equalize. So they both get the full 10 points. Now we talked about longevity, but not to its full scope, as an important part of longevity is staying on the court and your body holding up throughout your career. So now we have to discuss durability. Damn, let's go ahead and chalk it up. We've reached the brow's one obvious loss here, right? Well, no, actually, let's slow it down a sec. I came across an interesting article recently written by Haley O'Shaughnessy of The Ringer entitled Exploring Overlooked NBA Truths, sort of like an NBA Mythbusters, but from the inverse angle. Now, a section of the article is on this exact debate. Why do we think of Anthony Davis as more injury prone than Kawhi Leonard when, as Reddit user Brian Scalabrine pointed out, and shout out you by the way, Kawhi's actually averaged fewer games per season over the course of his career, made especially true with Kawhi missing over a fourth of this current season, playing in only 9 games thus far. Now the difference isn't that great at all. It's not like there's a disparity, but the truth of the matter is, generally we think of Davis as one of the most injury prone stars in the league, while Kawhi, not so much. So the article goes on to give a multitude of reasons for this false perception. Basically, the main one being that New Orleans relies on Davis much more heavily than San Antonio does Kawhi. That the absences, when they exist, are just that much more evident to us. As well as the fact that Kawhi spent much more time in the postseason where he'd never been unavailable up until the injury last season. Now here on the other hand are a couple things that they don't mention in this article. First of all, and this relates to their point of having less of a need for Kawhi, they don't account for the many rest games in which Pop simply sits a healthy Kawhi and other stars out. Nevertheless, this is a very small sample in the grand scope of things. The most important thing to note here, which also pertains to our look into how these players would fare into their future with the Boston Celtics, is style of play. Kawhi quite obviously takes a lot less risks, does not spend nearly as much time suspended in the air battling for rebounds or banging inside, and he does not rely nearly as much on athleticism in his game, which makes for less wear and tear, which makes for the ability to continue success after multiple injuries later in his career. Therefore, still gotta give Kawhi the edge here. 7 out of 10 for Kawhi, 6.5 for AD. And last category, simplest category, and perhaps the most significant, is attainability. Kawhi 4, Davis 6. The idea that Kawhi Leonard could leave the Spurs is an extremely new one, and I see the rumors dying down pretty soon. But AD, as I said earlier, I think as long as he plays in New Orleans, he'll be a target at the deadline, season after season after season. And I think there's a very high chance that he won't retire as a Pelican. That being said, acquiring a generational talent like AD will never be simple or easy. The same goes for Kawhi, especially considering the strength of his front office, but AD is in a different class of what you call an untouchable asset. New Orleans will only give him up if they absolutely have to, and will likely ask for quite the return. That is, unless they wait until the last possible minute to trade him. Adding up the totals here, it comes close. You got 49.3 versus 51.5. AD is the marginal winner. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at ClayAllenTV. And as always, leave your thoughts, feelings, perspectives in the comment section down below. And I want to give a shout out to BSOLZ for inspiring this video. If you don't know of it, he's got a series called NBA Battlegrounds, where he compares and contrasts two players with a similar scoring system to the one you saw here, though with the different categories and of course a different end goal of who is the better player overall, whereas this is just the better trade option. Now, I think even he got the idea from a separate YouTuber, not sure who, but nonetheless, I never seen those videos. The inspiration for this came directly from BSOLZ, and I'm gonna link his most recent edition of the series in the description, as well as the article I referenced from The Ringer. That's all for now. Clay Allen, stay ballin', and I'm out. Peace.